Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Policy Board meeting for Tuesday, June 11th, 2024 at 3 p.m. We do have quorum. So in the interest of everyone's time, we're going to go ahead and just get started. Welcome, everyone. So glad you're here on a beautiful Tuesday in June. And I think we have a robust agenda today. So looking forward to hearing all of the updates and action items that we have. The first thing that we have is approval of today's agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda for WAMPO TPB for June 11th, 2024. Thank you. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Right. And Mayor Jim's trying to beat me. All right, next on the agenda is approval of the TPB minutes for May 14th, 2024. Any discussion, adjustments, amendments that need to be made? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone want to abstain because they weren't here? Okay. All right. Next, we will go on to the director's report. Had an opportunity to meet with Chad and staff last week and go over the agenda, and it's a great report. So Chad, let's do it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the Transportation Policy Body. We have a few reports from staff to report to you. The first item itself is request for proposals. We have several initiatives that we had, and Peter is here to update on RFPs and K96 project status, as well as transit ridership. Peter, thank you.
There we go. Okay, continuing with our regular updates on the requests for proposals. We do have several of them out. I am so happy to have a microphone here today. So with these routine updates, we're in the process of several requests for proposals. So our intelligent transportation systems architecture, we are in the process of getting that updated. So we are looking at a consultant. The RFP for that has closed, and we reviewed 2 submissions. We're going to meet with a consultant selection committee actually tomorrow, probably looking at maybe a consent agenda item for a contract at one of our future TPP meetings here coming up soon. The travel demand model update phase 2, which we were offering so we could get technical support with the travel demand model, as it's a very complex product, requires some calibration, and it's always good to keep it updated with the best information. That proposal, the proposal deadline for that RFP closed on June 7th. We had just one proposal, so we're going to coordinate with our state partners on the next steps for that. Again, that could be another consent item on a contract here coming up in the next couple TPB meetings. The Safe Routes to School Planning Assistance RFP, which we are trying to develop safe routes to school plans for all 15 districts plus private schools within the WAMPO region. That was issued back on May 31st. Our deadline for submissions is on June 24th. And then upcoming, we have, of course, our Safe Streets and Roads for All SS4A implementation grant application. So we still plan on issuing RFP for that one as well. And then don't have it on the slide here, but I wanted to talk about our bike ped counters, wrapping up a few details on some contract details, but hopefully we'll be coming again with another consent agenda item for a contract here soon. Any questions for me on the request for proposals?
Thank you, Peter. Next item.
Something we had talked about from our previous, we had our state partners come by and make presentation on the K96 improvements projects. And we thought it might be a good opportunity to bring this around to what we do here at WAMPO in the TIP. So this project is in the TIP. It's that KDOT project, K96, between I-135 and I-35. And it's listed in there to expand from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, improve interchanges with surface streets. You can look it up via the WAMPO ID on the screen, that R21-06. Currently, the preliminary engineering, row acquisition, utility relocation, and several other wonderful acronyms that you can go see in the tip on our website you can see those exact amounts and the federal funding that is coming to the WAMPO region for this project. The estimated total cost will be about just shy of $300 million for the entire project. Of course, that won't all come in 1 year. That'll be phased out over several years. But if you want to see more details on that, I would encourage you to go onto our website. You go to WAMPO, what we do. Underneath the Dropbox, you'll find TIP, and then you can see the full TIP document and see this among many of the other projects and the different federal funding and resources that are coming into the WAMPO region beyond just our WAMPO suballocated funding. Any questions for me on the TIP? Well, the project in the TIP. Okay. And then I was going to give just a quick quarterly transit update on our ridership numbers. So for 2023, Wichita Transit is continuing to climb back up to where we were prior to 2020. Derby Dash holding strong, about 8,800 riders. Hayesville Hustle still right around that 3,000 mark. Sedgwick County Transportation and Butler County Transit both kind of holding steady around the 18,000 and just under 10,000 respectively. Any questions for me on the quarterly transit update?
Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciated those 3 items. And we have next item on safety. As you know, we did a lot of initiatives with Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. Kim Neufeld is helping coordinate with KDOT on some of the initiatives that KDOT and WAMPO are together embarking in the future. Kim, thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. We are excited by all the safety projects we have going on and all the wonderful leadership that we're getting from KDOT on safety. Did attend their KDOT Traffic Safety Conference. That was wonderful networking. I think we already kind of reported on that. Wanted to also give you an update. We do have the KDOT WAMPO joint behavioral safety grant out. That application's out. They're due June 30th. So hopefully we will see some applications come in that have some innovative ideas for how do we really address safety in people's behavior. So this is not for infrastructure. It's more geared towards the safety initiatives. So we're excited about that one. Peter just mentioned the Safe Routes to Schools RFP that is out again, closes at the end of this month, and excited to be able to help all of our school districts and private schools receive help with developing their Safe Routes to Schools plan. So that one's very exciting because not only does it improve the safety for the students and families that attend that school, but also for the community utilizing that whole area. So it is really community focused as well. So those are the safety updates I have.
Thanks so much, Kim. Appreciate it. Now, next item, we have Marky Jonas helping us reporting on Amtrak studies. There are 2 studies that's going on currently. One is less than 750 miles. Another one is greater than 750 miles length of the corridors, rail corridors. In your handout, there is a handout like this near you that is long distance studies that's happening in various regions. So Marky is here to update on corridor ID programs and those status. Thank you, Marky.
Yes. Hi, I'm Marky Jonas, Administrative and Public Outreach Coordinator. So most of this information is in the staff report in the packet, but the Heartland Flyer Extension update was selected by the Federal Railroad Administration in December of last year for a possible extension between Oklahoma City and Newton, Kansas. So it would run right through Wichita. And one of the big things to note in this is that it was chosen in the Corridor Identification and Development Program, which was a great first step for this project. And then KDOT is anticipated to complete a service development plan at some point this month. And then their program and federal matching funds could pay for the planning and the construction of the Heartland Flyer extension, but the operation, those costs will have to be decided upon through legislation. So that's a little bit up in the air on that side still. But assuming the funding is available, then it would expect it to be operational in 2029. And then there's a map of the proposed extension. Any questions?
Thanks, Marky.
Okay.
We can update on the next item.
And then the next thing I was going to talk about is that we are currently in a round of public engagement for our long-range metropolitan transportation plan. So that opened on May 20th and it will continue through the rest of this month. There are copies of the survey at the seats around the table. And then it's also online at our website or through this QR code. We also have extra paper copies if anyone would like one. So please take part, please share it. The more feedback we can have, the better. And then please let me know if you'd like WAMPO to either attend an event or to speak on it or anything. We also have some flyers in the front of the room here if anyone wants to put those up. And then I'm also very excited. We just received some keychains that are branded for WAMPO. So if anyone would like to have those, please do take some. There are plenty of them. Any questions on that?
And Marky, were you, and if you already did this, I'm sorry, I can't remember. Were you going to send us like the summary of this so that we can send it out far and wide? Each of the municipalities and counties can send it
I
out?
did send one, but I can send it again if you didn't receive it.
That would be great if you can send it to everyone and then we can share it on social. We can share it with our distribution list. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, sounds
Okay,
good.
thank you.
And the next item is, the TIP public comment period that's starting, that Mark is going to update. That is connected to today's action item that Project Selection Committee recommended the list. And then Marky will update on the, go ahead, Marky.
Yeah, so I don't have a ton to share on this, but this is tentative based on the action items that are coming up. But assuming those are approved, then the public comment period for the Transportation Improvement Program for federal fiscal years 2025 through 2028 will open tomorrow and run through July 11th. Any questions on that?
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And with that, Madam Chair, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, staff. Thank you, Chad, for your leadership. Thanks for all the great work. Next on the agenda is consent agenda item. And Peter, and it says Kelly too, but I think Peter's got it. You're here if we need backup.
Hello, on this consent agenda item, WAMPO, we had a project back in 2019 that was ultimately canceled. The project had some suballocated funds on it. Those were since deobligated, put towards everything, and we were under the impression this project was laid to rest. However, I was informed by our state partners that we still had an active legal agreement on this project. And as a matter of due course and making sure that this is officially canceled, they drafted a cancellation of agreement for us, and that's the consent item for today.
And I asked at our pre-WAMPO meeting on Friday, this is just a technicality, right? Just kind of wrapping up
Yeah.
loose ends.
The project was, for all intents and purposes, canceled several years ago, but we do need to officially clear out this legal agreement, which will require a consent item at one of our transportation policy body meetings.
And then if this item is approved today, I'll sign it today and Chad and staff can get it sent off to state. So any questions for Peter or for Chad regarding this? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I just have a question. It says it's a regional asset inventory. Is there another avenue for having this inventory?
Looking through our TIP documents, we haven't done quite a similar project. From the notes and information I could find at the time when we initially had these funds obligated in the beginning of 2019 for this project, we were looking at developing a regional transit asset inventory setup, something that would go across different jurisdictions and they would talk and communicate and have this centralized repository. However, once they started exploring that, there wasn't quite the appetite, as I kind of gathered from that, from all the jurisdictions coming together and cooperating in a very timely fashion. And when the project continued, ultimately, they weren't able to get it started and going, and the funds ended up deobligating in 2020. As kind of the little background on that project, but as of right now, it's something we could explore again in the future if, if that was something we think is necessary or maybe helpful for the region.
I'm not sure it's necessarily helpful. I just curious as if we had another avenue for assessing an asset like this. But if there's no need for it, or if there's not an interest in communities having one, then I would say, yeah, you should just cancel this and not worry about it.
Thank you.
Anything to add, Chad? Okay, great comments.
And,
Thank you,
to-
Mayor. Appreciate your comments and thoughtfulness.
To Mayor's point, individual jurisdictions like City of Wichita has its own robust program of maintaining and monitoring the pavement and bridge structures. County also has a program. At some point, a regional inventory of combining all these systems into one is what this accomplishes, and that can be done in some time future. At the moment, all the pieces were not put together due to other priorities that took up. So thank you.
COVID. No, I'm still blaming everything on COVID. All right, this is consent agenda item, so it will require a vote. Is there a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, Allison at KDOT, I just wanted to let
Hey,
everybody
Allison.
know that the funding that was for this project, when it was deobligated, already went back into the WAMPO suballocated pot of money back in 2020. So that money didn't get used and it returned to WAMPO for whatever uses you all had programmed. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate that comment. Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Motion passes. Next, we have public comment. Is there anyone from the community who would like to have 3 minutes of fame and share their thoughts with us? Alan? You used up your time today at the Wichita City Council meeting. All right, seeing none, and I don't think there's anyone online for public comment. All right, seeing none, we'll go into our action items for the day. The first action item is federal fiscal year 2025 through 2028 TIP Project Selection Committee WAMPO sub-allocated funding recommendation with Peter.
I'm very excited to present on our project selection committee funding recommendations. So from September 15th to February 2nd of 2024, we held a combined call for projects for both the MTP and the FFY 2025 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program. And then in April and May, the project selection committee met to make recommendation on awards of WAMPO suballocated federal funding from 25 to 28. The PSC meetings for the MTP projects are still to come. So below here, you can see that PSC has made recommendations on the use of available, or in some cases projected available funding for the 2025 to 2028 TIP. And they worked on the assumption on this funding table here below. So we had some projected year-end balances for 25 and 26, which are both in the current TIP. And then you can see our projected federal funding balances for 27 and 28 at the end in that total column. And that's what the PSC worked on to make funding award recommendations for these projects. We have them mapped here before you on all the different projects that receive funding, and I'm going to get to the table, and this is on page 23 of your packet. So again, the total amount of WAMPO suballocated funding that the PSC made award recommendations on was in the amount of about $34,367,000. There are several 25 and 26 year projects, and then several 27 and 28 year projects that were some of our newer projects, making up the bulk of those funding recommendations for those later years. So our next steps on these funding recommendations, and for today, Immediately after this action item, for Amendment 8, some of the recommendations the PSC made for federal fiscal years 25 and 26, which are still part of the current TIP, some of those recommendations will be included in Amendment 8. So right after on this action item, we'll have Amendment 8 where some of these award recommendations will be included in this upcoming amendment. Once these recommendations are considered, we have the public comment period for the TIP. That'll be from tomorrow through July 11th. And then on July 22nd, we'll have our TAC recommendation for the TIP, and then hopefully put that up for a TP vote on August 13th of this year. Which brings us to our action items. Approve the PSC's federal fiscal year 2025 to 2028 WAMPO suballocated funding recommendations as presented. Not approve the recommendations. Approve with specific changes. Our TAC recommendation was to approve the PSC's federal fiscal year 2025 to 2028 WAMPO suballocated federal funding recommendations as presented.
So moved.
Any questions for Peter? TAC approved, right? Yep.
Mhm.
Any recommendations or questions? I will take your motion. Is there a second? Awesome. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the item passes. Next on the agenda is federal fiscal year 2023 through 2026 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 8. Peter.
Start here. So the public review and comment schedule and our timeline for Amendment 8, we had the public comment period from May 3rd to the 17th. TAC made their recommendation on May 20th, which brings us today for the June 11th TPP vote. So you can check out the full details in the amendment summary that is shown on the screen as an attachment linked in your packet and in a link in the bottom of the web page at the URL shown. 15 projects in Amendment 8 have changes that require TAC TPP approval. There are 8 new projects and 7 projects that are to be modified in the TIP. Additionally, there are 2 projects that we give notice of that are having some, that have required administrative adjustments, but don't necessarily require official TAC or TPP approval. So on the map, I've got quite a few projects. We have the City of Derby Rock Road Corridor improvements. We have Wichita Intelligent Transportation Systems along the East 21st Street North corridor. We have a Wichita 17th Street North I-35 to Hillside project. We have the Redbud Path from Woodlawn to K96. The West Street I-235 MacArthur project, sponsored by Wichita. The Butler County project, the Southwest Butler Road improvements from Southwest 176th Street to Southwest 155th Street. And then several KDOT projects. We have the KDOT Bridge number 305 on I-35 and Bridge number 302 on the US 54 ramp in Sedgwick County. We have the KDOT project, the Goddard US 54 and 183rd Street. KDOT's rail line rehabilitation along the K&O Railroad, and then several more K&O Railroad projects along K&O Railroad on Harry Street in Wichita, K&O Railroad on Southwest Boulevard in Wichita, K&O Railroad of May Street in Wichita, K&O Railroad 31st Street, and then Tracy Avenue in Clearwater and St. Clair Street finally in Wichita. And this is just listing all those projects that there were on that map.
It's on page 29 on the packets, right?
Thank you, Jack. We do also have the table with the amendment changes here. This can also be found on the website, and it has more detailed information on both the projects that were amended, added, or the administrative adjustments. And here's our table with the WAMPO suballocated funding changes. And you can see some of those PSC recommendations reflected in this table. That is go. And then the total local, state, and federal funding changes are available in that staff report as well. And that is in the amount of total of 13,772,000. So Amendment 8 officially meets those requirements, public comment and review period consistent with our current MTP, fiscally constrains, and adds about $3.77 million in federal funding to the TIP.
13, right? 13.77.
13.77. And finally, that brings us to our action items. Approve the FFY 2023 to 2026 TIP amendment as presented. Not approve the TIP amendment as presented. Approve Amendment 8 with specific changes. And of course, our TAC recommendation was to approve the 2023 to 2026 TIP Amendment 8 as presented.
Move to approve as presented.
Did anybody have any questions for Peter? Did y'all get together before the meeting and like plan how we can get out of here in 45 minutes or less, right? We may break a record today. Second, did we have any questions though for Peter? Are we good? Thank you, Peter. Great job. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Fantastic. All those in favor say aye. Anyone
Aye.
opposed? All right, thank you so much. The motion does pass. Thank you, Peter, for your great job, great presentation. Next, we go into discussion and updates. The first item is a population projections. This is an item that we had brought to us, a while back. And Peter, maybe even want to kind of give a little bit of the foundation. We talked about this on Friday, but Commissioner Dennis had some concerns as far as the methodology and was there consistency and how each community predicted their projections. And so as an executive committee, we kind of took a step back and thought maybe we should be a little bit more thoughtful, intentional, and come up with a plan that was a little bit more consistent. So Peter, build upon that, and then I'll let you introduce Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so we have been working with the Center for Economic Development and Business Research in Wichita that has done these kind of calculations for decades. And they work with both the Census Bureau and also help develop projections for the state of Kansas. Earlier, we had created a set of population projections that included methodologies and numbers that we got directly from our different jurisdictions within the region. However, it looked like a lot of those projections didn't maybe use something consistent, and we wanted something a bit more data-driven. And yes, I guess I would put it the best way, data-driven and kind of a consistent way of developing these projections. To that end, we've been talking to the folks over at the Center for Economic Development and Business Research, and they've kind of proposed a alternative methodology for the WAMPO region that'll hopefully better capture how different jurisdictions grow in a region. And Jonathan here with the Center for Economic Development Business Research, I might start saying Sedber here in a moment. We'll kind of expound upon the different things he's doing, but we're presenting some draft projections today. These are just draft projections. We wanted to get these in front of you so you guys can take a look at them and we can start getting feedback. In addition to what Jonathan will talk about, the methodology and these draft projections that they've created, we're in the process of reaching out to the different jurisdictions all over WAMPO to, one, get some building permit information to help inform these. And Jonathan will go into the specifics on how that will work. And then trying to meet with individual jurisdictions about this process as necessary. I say as necessary. We emailed everybody and we're making calls, I guess would be the simpler way to say it. So Jonathan, with that, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And Peter, would you mind flying for me?
What's that, Jonathan?
Would you mind advancing the slides?
Oh,
for
certainly.
me? Okay, great. So as Peter mentioned, I'm Jonathan Norris with CEDBR. In this population forecast, we did this initial version of it that took our county level population forecasts that we developed last year, and it allocated down to the communities from that county level. Today, we're going to be going over this alternative forecast as we did at the TAC meeting a few weeks ago, and going over what the next, going over the methodology and talking about what the next steps are in this process. So a little background, Peter, you can advance the slide. A little background about the model. The purpose of the population forecast is to give the most accuracy and utility to the travel demand model that we can. Very important in that is capturing which areas and in what fashion the populations are going to grow over the through 2050. Right. As I mentioned, there were some issues with the way that the populations were being forecasted out via the allocation method, and that led to several communities expressing some concerns with that. So we gave it some additional thought and recognized that there's some factors in there, such as historical growth and investments in building permits and changes in migration patterns, that meant that this allocation method wasn't quite working and wasn't quite meeting the goals of communities as far as what their expectations are. So with that, we have to recognize also that there are overall constraints. And I know that there is the goal of trying to make sure that this is captured as accurately as possible, in addition to meeting the expectations that these communities have. So there's a balancing act in this model, and that's the purpose of the meetings that we're going to be having over the next couple of weeks. You can advance the slide. So how this model works, instead of an allocation method, we were actually doing these community level projections in the same way that we did our state level forecast, or with the counties. Overall, how that works is it's an age cohort survival model. So you have the existing population that ages up, is subject to fertility, so there's births, and is subject to mortality, so there's deaths. And then this migration estimate is the really interesting element in an area as interconnected as Wichita. So what we've decided is that our overall county level forecasts are what we feel is the accurate value for growth for the entire region. And so we've implemented the previous county level forecast as an overall constraint. And then we're allowing the communities to dynamically go through this age cohort survival model in order to get to those growth targets. And go ahead and advance the slide. How that migration calculation is being developed. There's three components of it that we're adding in that was not really being captured adequately in the previous way that we did that. Number one is community net migration. So that's the history of migration into communities. We had that weighted at an overall value of 80% in the values that you're going to see today. Or I should say, this is was the original vision, and there's been a couple of changes, and you'll see where those come in, where you have the greater of 5 or 10 year annualized migration rates into these communities. Second is the employment forecast for the region, which CEDBR also produced for WAMPO, which looks at the 5-year employment estimates for each city, as well as the composition of employment, and forecast those forward. And this third element, which is what we're currently working on, which is building permits. The logic behind that is that there are communities that are, some more than others, making investments into building up new residential area and increasing the potential capacity for people to migrate into those areas, as well as bringing in additional employment. So together, these will give differently weighted values for how that growth is projected throughout the region. So go ahead and advance. As a simple example, talking about how the constraints are made on that. So we have the overall allocation of some of these variables being reduced according to how those communities represent a fraction of the total population. So as an example of that, in the previous forecast where you might have 2,000 net new people in the WAMPO region versus systematically in the new forecast, 1,900 net new individuals, that difference of 100 would get allocated down to communities there based on their share of the total. So go ahead and advance. So in this next section, we're going to talk about the changes that we've made in that calculation and review what the actual values of the employment forecasts are as they stand. And then talk about the next steps and where we are in that. So go ahead and advance. You saw this slide previously of how the migration is being calculated, and that, what I want you to pay attention to is the 60 and 80% weighting on the community net migration trend and the 20% on employment. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. This is what we found actually gave more reasonable estimates for growth at the current stage, right? We flipped the weighting that employment and migration had on the effect. This is essentially a piecewise system of weighting those different factors within the calculation. What we found is that the community net migration being weighted much more highly created a lot of volatility just because of changes over time in how that migration has changed. The building permits is going to further stabilize that. And for communities that were able to get building permits for, it will be weighted at 60, 20, and 20 in this fashion. So we can advance. So overall, these are the previous employment forecasts as an input that were previously established and agreed upon for the region, which shows that overall we're seeing solid growth in employment in most of the cities, with really the only area that's experiencing notable decline is in the unincorporated region. Let's keep going. And the overall population forecast, which these are, as they stand now, these are in your packet. I believe that's on page 34. That overall, the population is expected to grow a fair bit through 2050 in most of the incorporated areas. Unincorporated areas, even in the current stage, are experiencing out-migration, and that's largely driven by the declining employment in that area. And overall, we're expecting to see a net increase of over 80,000 residents from now to through 2050. So let's move to the next slide. You can see how these are broken out here, and these slides will be available after for anybody who wants to look in more detail. But overall, we're seeing that the entire WAMPO region as a whole is expected to grow a total of 14.5% by 2050. Which this is above the expected overall statewide rate of growth. So the area is growing strongly. And a lot of that growth is concentrated into some of the larger cities within the region. Let's move to the next slide. The migration estimates themselves for each of the communities are as follows. Overall, these estimates as they stand are positive, except for in only a few areas. Viola is net zero, and we have that out-migration hastening over time, like as a compounding effect, as there are more opportunities in some of the actual incorporated areas. So back to the building permits, I wanted to just touch on the fact that this is where we are right now, the stage that we're in. And you can go to this next slide. And I just want to talk about, go ahead and advance the slide one more, Peter. This is the next stage, right? As Peter mentioned, we are in the process of communicating with each of these communities in order to get building permits data on single family, multifamily, and commercial kinds of residential permits, so that we can see actually which communities are being invested in the most heavily as far as developing opportunities for people to move in, increasing the capacity of these communities. And now, between now and July 8th, we're going to be meeting with anyone of these communities who has questions for us and comments or concerns with how the current projections are looking, so that we can help smooth some of that process out. As it stands, as of about an hour ago, we have 11 of the 22 communities in the region represented. So we're halfway there, which is great news for us. And then we are planning on presenting those adjusted estimates on June 24th for TAC and July 9th for TPB. Any questions?
Jonathan, I have a question. So you said that 11 of the communities have, so the graph that's on page 34, are these numbers all up to date or some of them up to date? I don't understand the 11 part.
Right. So the table that is on page 34 is these are our population forecast that was generated with migration only being calculated via the community net migration trend and the employment. Peter, could we go back like 2 slides? Yeah, one forward. That one, yeah. So in this, each of these components of migration is essentially a fraction. It's weighted by a certain fraction of the total migration estimate, right? So if we did not have building permits data for a community, the weighting of the building permits estimate is 0. In which case we allocated 80% of the migration contribution from the employment estimates and the other 20% from the community net migration. As we get this building permits data, we're going to be reducing the contribution to those overall estimates of the employment forecast and replacing that with contributions from building permits. What this will do is increase the how realistic these estimates are by looking at, all right, which of these communities are investing in expanding their residential capacity. And that will be then reflected in the model. So as it stands, yes, all of these estimates are up to date, but as we move forward on integrating those building permits data into the model, that's going to change the estimates. It's not going to change them radically, but this is going to make it more reflective of where that growth is seen.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any
Other
other questions? Yes, Jennifer.
I would just like to say on behalf of Andover, I'm glad that we do not have building permit information in there yet. I know we're meeting with you on Monday. Yes, certainly we're concerned that our 2025 population is lower than the 2023 July 1 estimate by the census. That's quite concerning to us. I believe we are one of those communities whose building permits, multifamily and single family, will show that those numbers are not quite there yet, but I appreciate your ongoing work.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's great feedback for us. We received Andover's permits earlier today. I took a cursory glance through them, and yeah, I think that is going to definitely make a difference. And we'll talk more about that on Monday.
I represent City Mays, and my question: why only 20% to building permits for new, especially for new building permits? Why was that number so low? And why the flip-flop from employment? Because we're a very mobile society. There's people that there's a lot more jobs in Wichita, obviously. And where you look at where people actually live, unless this is really a reflection in population where people work.
So it's actually so there's a couple of questions in here that let's kind of separate them out. The question on whether or not this is based on where people live or where people work, it's both. Having employment being a factor in calculating how people are migrating throughout the region is something that increases the actual accuracy of the forecasts. The reason why we flipped those estimates is because looking at historical migration led to a lot of volatility, and it led to too much of a a self-reinforcing pattern within growth, because the more diverse communities tend to like over attract individuals of certain like age cohorts or like race and like racial demographics. And so what we wanted was something that was taking those into account, but not creating this self-reinforcing cycle. The decision to do the 60-20-20 distribution, that's something that we worked on internally. And that is, the short answer of that is that's our expertise within understanding how growth is reflected and looking at what creates a more realistic estimate that is considering some of the constraints on the overall regional population.
Any other questions for Jonathan or for staff? Yes, please.
Will open or developments under construction be considered? Many cities, you can pull historical building permit information, but there could be 2 or 3 developments currently being built that could be more impactful than the previous 3 years of building permits.
Good
Yeah,
question.
so that's an important question, and thank you. That is part of the reason that we are interested in meeting with some of these communities so that those kinds of concerns can be brought to us, right? What we've asked for is the last 6 years of building permits data. And if that's something that is not going to sufficiently capture what is ongoing in those communities, that's something that we're very much encouraging these communities to bring to us. And we want to meet with you or whoever those representatives are to have that heard so that we can make sure to take that into account as we develop this model.
Yes, please.
Have you thought about taking in consideration school district growth? I know
That's
within
something-
Goddard,
Yeah, that's something that
there's a migration, I think that takes place in our school district dwarfs our community, but still, that's a major employer, but
Mhm.
just taking in employment, that really school children and parents moving their kids, sometimes they want to go to Goddard for wrestling or Mays for basketball or Andover for whatever. People kind of shop, I think, sometimes the school districts around, and maybe that something needs to be looked at as well.
And that's great feedback, and thank you for your comment. To answer in short, yes, we did consider that. We looked at how influential that was on some other growth patterns in certain areas in historical trends, like how school districts were attracting in certain like age cohorts and demographics, and seeing if that actually did reflect in the growth in those communities. What we found is that it didn't significantly move the needle, whereas some of these other contributions really did in a more reflective way. So while
I would think that at least in my community, it is definitely a major impact in a demographic factor. So if you discount that for everything, I think at least in the Goddard community, it has a major impact.
Great, and that's good feedback for us to have. What I would encourage is for you to coordinate with WAMPO and with Sasha Hain with JEO, who's our partner for this project, and let's schedule a meeting so that we can talk about that and look at how that might reflect in the community.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you. And thank you for the robust discussion we've had, like I said, in a couple previous meetings for, folks stepping up, TVV members stepping up and asking thoughtful questions so that we could take the next step and maybe kind of solidify this process so we feel good about the data when it actually gets finalized. And thank you, Peter, for taking the lead and being so willing to look into other options to make sure we're getting it right. All right. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Next, for discussion and updates, we have the Regional Transit Implementation Plan update with Bill.
Good afternoon.
Bill, welcome.
Peter, if you're at the computer or whoever could give me host capabilities for sharing. that I've updated the slides a little bit since I sent them out. Should I just use the slides that are there?
Try it now.
There we are. Okay, I want to give you an update primarily since we've had our second round of public meetings that we held last week. And so I just want to give everybody an understanding of the conversation. And those of you that attended a public meeting, if you would also want to provide your input here as to the discussion that was going on and things like that. But at the public meetings, we did give an update of our progress, and I'll touch on that a little bit here. And talk again to emphasize to folks what our needs and goals of the study were. And but we spent the bulk of our time talking about the ideas and more detailed ideas that we've developed and have been having conversations about to address those needs and goals. You know, everybody has seen this slide, I think, before, just to give you an understanding of kind of where we are in the overall process of getting through those 4 critical questions that we have to address through this study. And, you know, we are now at the, I think that point where we are refining the options that might be out there for specific communities. And then moving into that, okay, once we have a good understanding of those communities that have the desire to be active participants in providing transportation service within the WAMPO area, then we need to go through that process of understanding our individual communities more interested in being a provider, or maybe just a financial partner, and also then a partner in a larger maybe transit authority type organization within the county. That is the part of the conversation that we need to be moving into now. However, before we get to that, we need to understand what types of service each of the communities may be interested in, or whether or not there is any additional service that a community may be interested in. That's what part of my ask is going to be of today, of having each of the members of the TPV make sure that you are reviewing the range of alternatives and having a conversation with your community as to whether or not which of these might be reasonable, viable, supported within your community. At the public meetings, the things that I took away or we took away from the public meetings is that I think when you look at it at a more generalized level, that there is support for adding transit, and that could be support from the public, support from businesses, support at the government level. And maybe what I'll stop here and ask the question of those folks that attended a public meeting, is this the takeaway that you have from it?
Anyone have the opportunity to attend one of the public meetings? Yes.
I think, Bill, I appreciate the meeting we had. We had a little better group of cross section of our community. I think the thing that came out of our meeting was the need for senior transportation for medical things, and the public transportation piece of it was probably pretty limited. Would you agree with that, kind of from your listening?
Yeah, and at this point, I'm still kind of, putting both of those into that basket of public, because it's still that. But then as we continue to advance the conversation and refine the conversation, that that we can kind of maybe stratify that conversation of public. I guess the other, is there any other input that folks had?
We don't see any here, Bill.
Okay. So the other, I think, critical part that of the conversation is because we also talked in the meeting that, okay, that if there is this desire for more service, whether or not in the case of we just talked about in Goddard, if that focus is more seniors and persons with a disability, that there's still going to be that need if we do more of having a local element of funding. And I think that there was, for the most part, an acceptance of, yeah, that we as a community, if we want more of this service, we're going to have to be a part of the funding solution. And I don't really think that I heard anything that surprised people. Sometimes as we're doing this and going through studies like this, that people are surprised when you're saying, okay, if you want more for this type of service, that you're going to have to find a part of the money. In all of the meetings that we spent some time going through the range of more detailed alternatives that we have developed. And I think for the most part, again, that there was a good understanding of the concepts that we had identified, but kind of on the other side of that same coin is that there was, I think, still in some situations, a lack of awareness of the service that's out there. And I'm going to use Goddard as an example again of one of those things that we need to make sure as we move forward that we're doing is I don't think we got even too far into the conversation of alternatives before the idea of, well, how are you going to go through it and market the concepts came up. And I think that even with the existing services that we have out there, primarily through Sedgwick County Transportation, there is that continued need to market that service because there is still, I think, a decent cross-section of the population that's going, wow, that's available to me from a general public level or access to that service. And I think the last thing is that there's a general interest, I think, in continuing to have conversation of the options. We also went through and talked about what we saw as the study goals, which become very important in that the goals that I've identified here and we've discussed in the past really become the basis for the study options and kind of the grouping of the study options that we've been developing. Is that I find it much easier if we can kind of talk about options grouped into themes that reflect our goals. So that is how we've put each of we've developed the group of more detailed options that fall within each of these generalized categories that we have talked about before of types of service, from van pool to some additional fixed route to more demand response service to looking at what needs can we fill through using services that like Uber and Lyft to help support service for certain users within the region that we've developed using each of those types of service, a grouping of options that fall within each of these themes of improving the first is improving the commute opportunities to get to work in Wichita. That we're also, a next theme is that providing more opportunities for regional travel that would support the need or support medical trips, that could support shopping trips, could be school trips, it could be recreational trips, a trip to go see your friend. So that is our kind of our second theme, and we have a series of detailed options within those. And then the last one and these are in no particular importance order. And the last one that we've identified here is to support the growing and expanding suburban or exurban employment growth. And, you know, the whole time that you were talking about the updating of the population forecasts and such, that, you know, understanding where you are today and where you may be in the future is also very important in the transit work. Because we could very well, as a community, come up and say, well, geez, we see this emerging need for additional transit service in this particular area of the county or this particular community. But we just don't see enough of that need today that we can find additional resources to provide or provide additional service for that. But we also know that if each of the communities is growing, that need is most likely going to be changing in the future and getting more acute. So I think that we want to make sure that we're also considering the future, particularly as we look at implementation timing. So the table on the left here is a little bit more of a detailed description of the types of service and service concepts that we are looking at. And that within each of the columns, then we've identified that this particular type of service would support this particular theme within our 3 themes developed for service within the area. And I think that the key that we want to also point out here is that across all of the communities that we have within the WAMPO region, which of the ideas that we have here are going to change or be different. I'm sorry, not change, but be different. And the kind of the 2 things that are driving that is the demographic makeup of the community, whether or not it might be, you know, the quintessential description of a bedroom community, or is it a more holistic community where there are opportunities to live and to work, and those 2 characteristics are really going to influence the success of the various types of service opportunities. And then the other element to that is going to be essentially that proximity to Wichita. That with all of the when you're looking at the services that are available or those services that have been evaluated and tested in the past, such as the Lyft concierge service that was operated for a year out of Park City, Wichita is by far the greatest destination. But, and I don't think that surprises anybody, but as you're looking at the distance that people have to travel to get to Wichita for any kind of service, the more distant we are, the less convenient it is, and the less convenient it is to really want to make that trip using transit, or transit as we would define it anyway, so that we want to make sure that people have a good understanding of we are expecting that there is going to be diversity in the level of support for any of the alternatives that we're talking about, the level of whether an alternative is even logical to assume for a community. And I'll give you an example there of you know, we're not looking at the idea of providing commuter service from Mount Hope into Wichita. That when you're looking at the distance, when you're looking at the population size of the community, you know, that probably does not make a whole lot of economic sense to provide that service. It's probably not a service that people are looking for. But the idea of more middle of the day demand response service from New Hope to a Wichita or a New Hope to one of the other communities may very well be an opportunity or an option that that people within that community may be looking for. So again, so that then for each of these types of service and service opportunities, we've created I've been referring to them as a one pager, and it's really a description of the concept. Some of the key assumptions that we have taken into developing things for that particular concept, such as potential ridership, as the cost, as a potential funding breakout, and that some of the alternatives, like the ones that are showing here in this example, which are creating additional express routes, or not even additional, but creating express routes between Derby and Wichita, between Bel Air and Wichita, between Andover and Wichita, and Goddard and Wichita, so that we've identified that these kind of 4 directions have some level of opportunity to make those connections, and that for each of these alternatives, we've developed a separate one pager that contains the information consistent with what we're showing here, that they can be accessed through the QR code shown here, or they can be accessed through the web link that's shown there. And what we're asking, and I'll ask of you folks, is that if each of you could take a little bit of time and review each of those alternatives, putting on, okay, I'm a representative of this community hat, and what we are looking for is some feedback as to, is this an alternative or an idea that would work for my or our community? And what we're in the process now of doing is putting together I'll just call it a questionnaire, but then we will be distributing that to our stakeholder group, which has representation from each of the communities. We can also include you folks on that if you would like. And what we would like is that there then is a local conversation of each of the alternatives each of the alternative concepts. And then you can report back through the questionnaire whether or not, concept 1, which could be commuter service, has viability in our community. And in some situations, it's going to be a not applicable because we don't have your specific community connected to Wichita with an express route. But for each of the communities have gone through, particularly for demand response service, consistent with that type of service that's offered within the community through Derby Dash or Hayesville Hustle, but then between communities through Sedgwick County Transportation. Each of the communities have developed an estimate of annual ridership of, if we were to provide daily service in that community. We've developed a cost estimate for that service, and included in that cost estimate, we've also broken out, okay, the entire operating cost for a year might be X dollars. Y dollars would be that local cost responsibility based on some very basic assumptions of the cost distribution for that particular service. And that cost distribution has essentially come from 2 different, or I guess, well, here I think I've only got the one option here. I don't know why I've mixed up these slides, but this is the distribution of funding, or how we pay for Derby Dash within the region, with the bulk of that being funded through local operating costs, which is about 57%. But one of the things we want to point out, and I believe at this point that Derby is also working to get into the KDOT program, so that 57% may be a cost responsibility early on to kind of proof the concept, make sure you're willing to put skin in the game, but then you can get into the KDOT program and get some help funding that portion of it. So also with the understanding that, you know, that we're talking about 20 plus municipalities that could have some level of interest, that we also need to have that conversation. And this is where the bulk of the work is going to start moving to now is, well, say we have 15 communities that are interested in continuing or having that conversation of more transit service. Now we need to figure out exactly how we want to essentially manage that service. It could be that each of those communities could essentially be providing their own, and that's where I kind of listed as they all could be independent contractors. Or we could go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, and we could have one agency providing that service, and that may be putting more money into Sedgwick County Transportation so that they have more capacity to provide both intra-city or that travel within a community and more of the community to community or inter-community service that they're presently providing. And that all along between those two ends of the bookshelf, we have different intermediate options that we could be evaluating as a group. And the two things that we really want to be thinking about relative to that is the cost effectiveness, because as we move to the right on this spectrum, our cost effectiveness is going to get better, because really what we're doing is sharing a lot of the cost responsibility between different communities, and that some of those fixed costs really then get to be spread across others, and they're not really going to change very much. But as we again move across that spectrum, we have to understand that our local control is going to change, and that that if we're all independent operators, we can provide the exact kind of service to the exact population that we want to provide it to, but it's going to cost us. It's going to be less cost effective. But as we move into that one agency, it's just like now we're living in an apartment complex, and we have to be a little bit more cognizant of our neighbors and their wants, their desires, their travel patterns, things like that. And so that we lose some of that local control. But the service is more cost effective. So we're balancing those two things out as we move through the process. So, and that again, that as we look at each of those options, that, for anybody that's providing that service, these are all of the different things that each of those agencies is going to have to manage. And that those that I'm kind of showing that fall within this arc here are those parts of the service that we could very well share between all of them relatively easily. And each of these create our opportunity to move us somewhere along the continuum of sharing that cost responsibility. And those are things that we want to make sure we're considering moving forward. So I think with that, again, I think we're pretty well on track with our schedule. And I think that is what I wanted to talk with you about today. Sorry, that might have been a little bit long, but are there any questions?
Any questions for Bill? Yeah, please, Chad.
Thank you, Bill, for developing the alternatives, and our board members will evaluate those and look at those. And Marky Jonas said WAMPO is helping to make a questionnaire, so work with. So I just want to request you to share the thought that you shared at steering committee the other day. How, in your experience, some of the major employers partnered with government agencies in implementing the transit. That way, it's both beneficial to the employees, as well as employers, as well as the, service providers. So would you mind sharing that thought again and how that occurred and in your experience?
Okay, you mean relative to like commuter service?
Like the one you shared on the Fort Wayne, Indiana, I think, one of
Okay.
those you shared the other day.
So I think, one of the conversations that we always have is, the services that may be provided that benefit employers and whether or not we should get, we're able to get support from employers. And one location where I have worked in the past is Fort Wayne, Indiana, and that there, one of the large medical centers had two campuses that their desire was to provide service between their two campuses, and that for a good number of years they did provide a route between them, but that route though did not really connect with the downtown transit center, so it kind of, to a certain extent, it operated independently. That if you were traveling, between the two campuses that were both kind of on the same eastern side of town, that you could, benefit from that service. And there was always reluctance, I think, on the part of the transit agency there to have a deeper conversation with the medical agency, because they didn't want to kind of rock the boat there and have them just walk away from that service. But as part of a transit development plan that we were working on there, that as the consultant from out of town, you get that freedom to kind of come in and introduce ideas that are maybe a little bit different. And there we did introduce the idea of adjusting the route a little bit to provide that connectivity into the downtown transit center that expanded greatly the regional access opportunities associated with that route that the hospital paid for, but and that they were still, but as long as we were still providing that campus to campus connectivity, that they were still willing to put their exact same amount of money into it that they had for years, which was essentially covering the cost of that service. So I think that is one of those situations where, as we're looking at the cost of particular services, where we can have that conversation and be relatively sure of who are some of those employers that are benefiting, that we can also have that conversation with them as to, is there some willingness to put some skin in the game for you guys, from you guys. And that works, I think, or has opportunities for both a fixed route concept, but then also, and I think in each of the public meetings I was saying that, I drank the Vanpool Kool-Aid, and that Vanpool is another opportunity to really define some employer-based or employer-supportive transportation service, that then also that employers, in other regions have been very willing to put a little bit of money into the game. And the amount of money that you need to put in the game for Vanpool as an employer, or whatever money you're willing to put in, probably has a lot better return to your employees and your business than maybe other types of transit service that are available. So I think as we're walking down this road, we want to make sure that we're not just looking for each of you from a municipality perspective as a partner. We also want to be looking at employers as partners, but we're going to have to provide a service that they see the benefit of.
Any other questions for Bill? You don't see any here. Thank you, Bill, for joining us today. Thank you for all your hard work on this.
Oh, yeah.
Really exciting to see the future of transit in our region. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much.
All right, next on the agenda is committee and partnership updates regarding the executive committee. The next executive committee meeting is August 15th at 1 PM. It's right here in this building. It's on this floor. It's over in the MAPD conference room, and anyone is welcome to join. It is an open meeting. So if you're available August 15th at 1 PM, please feel free to come to executive committee. KDOT, any updates from KDOT today?
Hi there, JB Wilson, Public Information Officer for the Wichita Metro. As a lot of you know, it's June. That means construction season's in full swing, and I'm excited to report on some of our projects we got. Currently, southbound I-135 to westbound US 54, that's back open. I drove on it on the way here. It's really smooth. I recommend it. We're working consecutively on that one. So northbound I-135 to westbound US 54 will be closed until August. But for a detour for that one, you can continue on northbound I-135. You can exit on first. You'll take that to southbound I-135, and then you'll get to use southbound I-135 to westbound US 54 and C. Also next week, June 17th, we have northbound I-135, 2nd to 17th Street. We're going to start with a single lane closure. It's a rehabilitation project. I think that'll greatly improve the ease of drive for commuters in the Wichita area. I'm really excited about that one. And also June 17th is a big day, Monday. We have East 45th Street, the bridge over I-135. We're doing a single enclosure for that one as well. So, and that'll be a maintenance rehabilitation project as well.
Any questions for KDOT? Orange cones and cranes make me happy. Means progress. Awesome. Anything else from KDOT Metro? No, we're good. All right. And then Federal Highway, was Rick with us today? Didn't see anyone. Any other business or any other announcements for the good of the order? Seeing none, the next meeting will be July 9th, 3 PM right here. And if you have just a few minutes, because we are getting out early, if you would complete your MTP 2050 public engagement round 3 survey. I took mine. It just takes a few minutes, a few check marks. So if you can take a few minutes and help us get as many surveys as we can, greatly appreciated. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, I say aye. Anyone opposed? Bye. See you July 9th, if not before. Have a great day.